Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to be here. It's an honor also to participate in this important session. I would like to give you a brief introduction about climate change and what we can do about climate policy, and 15 minutes for some thoughts on this. So the year 2020 will be the year of the irreversible climate change. It will also be the year of irreversible climate protection and climate policy. The tipping points are very close. We see that there are no return from global warming already because we have reached 1.1 degrees global warming Celsius already. There will also be no return from global climate protection, especially if we see the active movements of many actors around the world. It's becoming more and more visible that climate change is advancing massively all over the globe, although there has been some action ongoing, but these are insufficient. Climate change was one of the dominant topics of the last year. It will be the dominant topic also of this year, and I would like to briefly explain why. Our house is on fire, but we see millions of people all around the world walking on the streets and shouting, "Fire, fire." This Friday for Future movement is the largest political movement in the history of mankind. 27,000 renowned scientists all around the globe confirm the Fridays for Future movement, confirm that the threat of climate change is very serious, very alarming, and very urgent. But still, the responsible people from politics and economy present friendly, smiling, small-scale efforts with ridiculous effect. The disputes are getting harder, the youth are impatient, but the change is within reach. At the same time, the counter-movements are also increasing. We are at a turning point. This is a real opportunity for change. The inconsistency, however, of the debates is a mirror of global change. We are at the beginning of a disruptive change towards more climate protection. The more contradictory the debate, the more it is an expression of global change. Still, we are in the midst of enormous contradictions regarding climate protection. It could hardly be more contrasting. On the one hand, we see the Fridays for Future movement is becoming larger and bigger and louder all over the world. On the other hand, we see the biggest oil company on earth going public, collecting 2 trillion euros. That is now the most valuable company of the world. On the other hand, we see that the Time magazine nominates Greta Thunberg as the Person of the Year. In its justification, it says that she persuaded leading politicians from majors to presidents to make commitments they had previously fumbled with. On the other hand, we see the COP25 International Climate Conference failing, almost failing, because there are 3 countries heavily opposing that there will be an effective outcome. One of those countries was Australia. Australia, which was burning the last weeks and months and is struggling with, especially affected by climate change. Not only Australia, but also the USA and Brazil were opposing any effective outcome of the conference. On the one hand, we see that the European Investment Bank has announced in the future they will not invest in any fossil fuel projects at all, even not in natural gas projects. On the other hand, but also the European Green Deal, we will talk later on at the conference about it, intends to spend 1 trillion euro for climate protection. On the other hand, we see a natural gas pipeline being celebrated, that is Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Natural gas will not be relevant in the future if we take the climate goals seriously. The demand for natural gas will decline. Nevertheless, we construct a new pipeline that is stranded investment. As the World Economic Forum recently reported, the greatest risks worldwide are coming from climate change, followed by species extinction and the dangers of digitalization. If now adequate climate protection measures are taken, we might need a carbon bad bank which collects the toxic fossil money and rescue investors with taxpayers' money. If we are not shifting away our money most urgently away from fossil fuels and nuclear power towards more renewables and energy efficiency, we might have a huge financial risk. This morning, I read in The Guardian that the Bank of England chief Mark Carney said the financial crisis is the most important financial crisis could happen if no action on climate protection is happening. So firms might go bankrupt if they not react urgently on climate protection. This says the chief of the Bank of England. So he knows what he's talking about. On the other hand, BlackRock, we saw recently, also the world's largest asset managers calling on companies to do more to combat climate change. Every government, every company and every investor must address climate change. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink warned in a letter to his heads of corporations worldwide. He expects a fundamental transformation of the financial world. Wow, that's a wake-up call. He knows what time it is, but look who's saying this. Shortly before, BlackRock has already joined the Climate Action 100+ network. That's an important network for investors, also for climate protection. But we see still a lack of action on a global scale. The one-sidedness of the debate is also a mirror of global change. We are at the beginning of a disruptive change towards more climate protection. The more successful, for example, electromobility or renewable energies are, the less conventional energies lose their appeal. In plain words, we could say the decade of fossil fuel sellout is beginning. Even Saudi Aramco's success at the stock exchange is nothing more than a rebellion of a dying fossil industry. Nevertheless, Saudi Arabia wants to collect the money also for their Vision 2030. They want to establish a world of renewable energy. That is the right direction, but not driven primarily by climate protection, but basically to prevent the economy from collapsing. Now, we see still a lot of stranded investments ongoing. If we look right now, Tesla company, car company in Germany wants to construct cars in Germany, announcing that he wants to construct a fossil gas production for heat. This company has the best options also to use 100% renewable energy. Not only because of rising CO2 prices, this is economically efficient, but also because the government in Germany spends 50% of the investment, the additional investments for renewable energy. There are a lot of examples of what they could do. Instead of a natural gas-fired power plant, they could use solar process heat, for example, which is already economically efficient at 5 cents per kilowatt hour. A combination of photovoltaics, which means a high temperature, or heat pumps, hybrid collectors for drying and painting, heating, cooling, or a biomass. You could use a biomass for boiler or CHP or deep geothermal energy. A lot of options that are already in place. So 100% renewables for all companies would be important. The other example you might have heard these days was Siemens with Stop Adani project, a project for coal mine in India. Siemens is delivering the transport technology in Australia, which is burning these days. So that was a big mistake and also a stranded investment to invest into a coal project. Siemens has the best opportunities to invest into renewable energy, into energy efficiency, the full range of climate protection technologies this company has at hand. Now, it's important to also change and to take the cost of climate change into account at the cost of fossil fuels. the costs climate change is causing, not only for economic reasons as a country, but especially also for companies who have big economic chances if they do reduce the emissions drastically. Here you see what we have to do. The emissions have to go down to zero as soon as possible. We do not have time left, meaning that all fossil fuel-based technologies need to be replaced by either renewable energy or energy efficiency. And the longer we wait, the more difficult the transformation will be. The longer we wait, the more unlikely it will be that we reach full transformation towards renewable energy. And that's important to see that there's no time left and the action is urgent, it's urgently needed. All different sectors have to contribute to climate protection. It's starting from buildings, transportation, district heating, power or industry. They all have the wedges to play to reach the emission reduction goals. You see here that basically three important aspects are relevant here. The first one is energy efficiency improvement, to do more for energy saving. That's first. The second one is renewable energy at all scales. 70% of the emission reduction are coming from renewable energy. And the third one is electrification of all different kinds of sectors, meaning, for example, in the transportation sector, we need more rail with electricity, more railways, or electric mobility at all stages, for example, but also the buildings could use electricity with heat pumps, for example. The electricity needs to be produced by renewable energy, so this is the way. This is a way we should go, meaning that all investments need to be shifted to these kind of technologies. There are many studies showing that a 100% renewable energy world is feasible. You will hear also this afternoon another talk about it, showing how it's feasible, technically feasible. It's economically feasible, of course. It creates a lot of jobs. It creates a lot of investment into the future and reduces the social cost and reduces the fossil fuel cost, nuclear cost, and therefore is cost efficient and brings also millions of new jobs, which is always relevant for different kind of countries. The energy transition, though, it's not a question of technical feasibility or economic feasibility. It's basically a question of political will. And if there's no political will, we will not see a change. And this is so important to acknowledge on all different kind of stages. We need this transformation. We are close at tipping points, not only in terms of climate change, we are at tipping points also as social and economic terms, because we see a lot of discussions right now, a lot of movements like Fridays for Future, Scientists for Future, and all the rest. So we really have to do more in order to take these tipping points into account. Several options. We have to start, to our opinion, to eliminate the fossil fuel subsidies, nuclear subsidies, of course, and divest fossil fuels. All investments into renewable energy would be important. But also carbon neutral cities. There's a new study in showing that we have the option also to decarbonize full cities with energy savings, and especially in buildings and transportation and industry, and also the strengthening of climate education and the engagement, disclosure of information of greenhouse gas emissions. So we really have to do also to tell, also from the scientific point of view, to explain of what's ongoing, why we need a steep transformation quite soon. So climate change is a billion-dollar disaster if we do not act right now. We need more courage for climate protection. We need resolute climate protection, which needs bravery, more courageousness, because if we do not want to end in a billion-dollar disaster with a lot of climate change costs, with a lot of fossil fuel costs, we will move into a financial crisis, which needs to be avoided. And the momentum right now is very important. We don't have to waste more decades with backward-looking discussions, but move forward. The Fridays for Future movement is showing what we can do, but they are also stopping already at some parts, they protest because they see too little success. Don't go home. We have to be all on the table and to establish the solutions in order to avoid a financial crisis. Let's start together and look for different kind of climate solutions, different climate protection solutions. And we should all look positively ahead and find all the energy we get in order to move together and reduce emissions and do all we can do for climate protection. The climate change is the largest economic threat we face, so everything is needed to avoid that. Climate protection creates enormous economic chances. So climate protection is an economic chance worth billions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. That was, I think, a great kickoff for our session here, and I'd like to welcome, whom of you knows Leaders for Climate Action? Okay, I think you have some work to do here. Here are Boris and Christoph, and they will introduce a great initiative. Please give them a warm hand of applause.
Thank you for being here so early in the morning. Thank you, Claudia, for this great introduction. We should have known if a professor presents in front of you, all the data is out, right? And I think talking about climate crisis is probably the best way to start in the day, right? Because it gives you this little sense of urgency, this extra adrenaline kick that we all need to get active. And this is a number, when I the first time heard it, I pretty much freaked out. Because when I read this Al Gore books and everything, it was always like, yeah, it's going to be bad, but it's going to be like 50 or 100 years. And then a while ago, I discovered we have like 8 years, a few months, until we hit pretty much the path to crisis. That's not a lot. When I moved to Berlin 20 years ago, when we started digital economy, to now, that's even less than half, and it feels like it was a day before. So I think there's not much time left. So we have 7 years, 11 months, and a few days to keep the 1.5 degree goal. And what is 1.5 degrees in comparison? Just to give you an example, when the last ice age in Germany, in 14,000 years ago around, Berlin had a 300-meter ice crust on top. And guess how much colder it was? It was 3 degrees average colder than today. So we're hitting really a crisis. And this is another way to look at the time frame we're having. This is called the carbon or the CO2 budget. So the whole box, what you see here, is all the carbon or the CO2 or the fossils that we have in the whole world. The dark gray box is what is still below the Earth, and this is where it should also stay. In the 1980s, they were always talking, we have like an oil crisis, where's all the oil? Today we know it's bullshit. There's a lot of oil, and they're discovering new oil fields left and right. So all this stuff is still underground. The light gray bar up here is all the fossils we have used in the last, 100 years. And this tiny little red box on the top right corner is the amount what's left to 1.5 degree global warming in average. So that's not a lot. And what's the difference between 1.5 or 2 degrees? Claudia already mentioned it. That 1.5 this is when the shit is starting to hit the fan. It's not going to be nice. But if we go above 2.x degrees, then we're maybe hitting tipping points, meaning this is non-reversible. So back from there, we cannot say, oh, Earth, we are sorry, come on, let's arrange something. There will be no way back. And our current trajectory is we're hitting 3 to 4 degrees, and no one here can even imagine what 3 to 4 degrees will look like. There's going to be social riots, migration waves, conflicts and wars, which is already starting today. So panicking, anyone? No, we're not. Why not? Of course, we have the Paris Agreement, right? the global political leaders came together with big jets, and they sat there, they made this agreement. There was a great movie about it, which was really good. But some people, some real deep experts say it's not even worth the paper it was written on. Why not? Because first of all, the goals are not ambitious enough. It does not include a CO2 pricing. So we're talking about a market failure here. CO2 doesn't have a price, so we can just abuse it earthwise. And there's no sanctions. And there's no sanctions, there's no actions. Like, I can promise you anything, what I do, and if nobody will punish me, so yeah, sorry, I'm gone by that time. None of those political leaders will be here in 30 years. So how will they care? So, and also it creates misleading hopes, because all of us thought, hey man, that's awesome, that now finally they're getting together. No, that's not happening. So, we are all people with an economic background, we are very strong in analytics. So we said, okay, let's put all that together. First of all, we took our Excel spreadsheets, said we have a bad situation, we have no time left, and we don't have a plan. So we are pretty much fucked, right? This is when we said, no, we have to do something. Even us as entrepreneurs and digital entrepreneurs, we have to do something now, because who else is going to solve it? I mean, the digital industries, these people here, all these people here are entrepreneurs, they are doers and makers, and they have the techniques to bring change quickly. So we thought maybe we're going to act quickly and thriftily. And actually, just thinking about it, one of my friends, David, I met him at a party, and what he told me is like, I really love what you're doing, because what you're doing is like rocket for good. I said, like, what do you mean rocket for good? He made like rocket internet, because they're really great in execution for doing something really only good for the world. So, okay, yeah, that sounds nice. Let's do it this way. So what is Leaders for Climate Action? This is the initiative we founded 6 months ago around. It's an initiative of digital leaders. And we are demanding from our political leaders to fix the market failure and put a price on CO2 next to some other things. But also, we don't only want to demand, we also thought it'd be very important that we take a role and lead in our way forward. That we, first of all the people who joined our initiatives, is a who of the German internet scene, that we first start by measuring our own footprint, reducing our footprint, and then offsetting the rest. And leadership in that sense doesn't mean that we are better than anyone else. It means we have to do something. And there's a responsibility that comes with it. And so we say we have to do more than just for yourself. Try to put your own company carbon neutral and try to influence other people in industry. And how that exactly works, Jan Christoph will tell you now.
Yeah, as Boris just mentioned, we as entrepreneurs ourselves, we believe that we can only demand more impactful and more powerful actions from our politicians and government if we lead by example. And that's why we came up with the Green Pledge. The Green Pledge is basically a catalog of different measures and actions to be taken by our members, either on a private level or on a company level, and the goal is to become climate neutral. And it consists of 3 different major pillars. The first one is we help those companies or the individuals to measure their footprint, their CO2 footprint. And then the most importantly, the second step is we try to give them a handbook and help them to reduce as much as they can their CO2 emissions. And finally, the rest of the CO2 emissions which couldn't be or which can't be offset in a short period of time will be offsetted by buying CO2 certificates in a gold standard. That is the status quo where we stand today. We just started 6 months ago, and we already have 280 members individually. They are all founders or managers of some of the most well-known companies in Germany, as you can see on the left. And we have in total 104 companies already which are completely carbon or climate neutral. And that corresponds to almost 1.5 million euros they spent within the last 6 months to offset their activities in their companies. And on a personal level, they spend roughly 100,000 euros to offset their private emissions. Some weeks ago, we started to approach the German venture capital scene to convince them to become members in our initiative. And honestly, we're really impressed, and the feedback was super positive, and we can proudly announce that we now have the vast majority of the most well-known German venture capitalists as members on board. And that sounds very exciting and thrilling, which it is, but more important is that we developed a sustainability clause, and the sustainability clause becomes now an integral part of their term sheets and their shareholder agreements in order to become climate neutral. And this sustainability clause is a contractual obligation to do the same as the VCs and our members, basically to raise awareness among the employees and within the company, and then measure the CO2 emissions, reduce as much as they can, most importantly, and then the rest will be offsetted. And the effect of this is, if you are now a digital company in Germany and looking for financing at a venture capitalist in Germany, the probability is very high that you are legally bound to do something and to confront this topic and to bring that into your company and make it part of the company culture. That is quite self-explaining. That is our vision for the next 1 or 2 years. We want to grow and expand to the rest of Europe and globally, and collect as many startups and venture capitalists to become members in our initiative. Yes, that's it so far. Thank you so much. And if you want to join our initiative and become a leader and make your company carbon neutral, or you want to donate and help to finance our donations, you're very welcome to talk to us. Thank you so much.
So, now you know Leaders for Climate Action. Whom of you is going to join this initiative? Today, tomorrow, today, it's today. Great. May I please have my fellow panelists, Anna, Andreas, Fabian, on stage, and we have 4 chairs, so excellent. So Alexandra already introduced us, so I'd like to jump into and know a little bit more about those 3, because they are leading by example as well. And first of all, Anna. Anna has founded a company called Outfittery about 8 years ago, from scratch to 1 million customers, which is amazing. About 1.5 years ago, she took a break, as well a baby break, and she founded again a company. Literally 3 days ago, when we spoke on the phone, she came from signing the papers, and guess what? Today is the first time she speaks about it in public, and we are, of course, all curious about her new venture. Anna, please.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I'm quite excited because, it's the first time in public speaking, not as a fashion entrepreneur anymore, but as being a climate tech entrepreneur now. And this is my new venture that I'm doing. I was very much inspired by Leaders for Climate Action. So while I was still at Outfittery, I joined the pledge, and I quickly noticed I don't only want to participate, but I really want to take the lead in this, and I want to enable other companies to take a lead in this as well, and being active, acting today, acting now in their companies. But this isn't easy, because what I quickly found out as well is that there's actually a lack of transparency when it comes to your sustainability KPIs. So especially when it comes to the carbon footprint. There are tons of calculators where you have questionnaires and filling out forms and so on and so forth to analyze your carbon footprint. But I believe only if a KPI is measured live and in real time, it is actionable. Only if you're punished right away for your behavior, it's actionable. If you're only punished like a year from now, you won't probably change a lot. And that's why in my new venture, we made it our mission to enable companies to analyze their carbon footprint, automate it in live, to reduce it and to offset the rest that they can't reduce. And the whole venture is called Planetly. And yeah, I'm starting this together with Benedikt Franke, who is a former founder of Helpling, and I'm very excited about that.
Benedikt, say hi so everybody can see you.
Hi.
Isn't that great? And plus, we don't have the time to wait for another year to punish and to bring action to the table, right? So, Andreas is a founder himself, and I really have to look because there are so many great titles this young gentleman has achieved already. He's not only the CEO and co-founder of a company called Konux, he is the youngest CEO to be one of the 40 under 40 entrepreneurs list by Capital Magazine. In early 2017, he got selected among Forbes top 30 under 30. He is out of the MIT Technology Report, one of the top innovators under 35 in Germany, and became, if that is not enough already, he became part of the European Young Leaders and the youngest Global AI Council member of the World Economic Forum. That's Andreas. And his company, they transform railway operations. And if you're like me, using the railway on a regular basis, Deutsche Bahn, you get very often frustrated during the last 2 years, and I'm very much looking forward to change that. And amongst that, Konux has been named the 2020 Global Clean Tech 100 company among the private, independent, and for-profit companies. So, Andreas, please introduce Konux and give our audience a little bit more background in what you do.
Perfect, I'm happy to do so. So, I mean, we saw on the slides before how much transportation is actually negatively contributing to emission. So it's above 20% of all CO2 emission is coming from transportation of people or goods. And this is mostly, we are traveling around the world or we are eating food that is coming from somewhere. And we were looking into this a little bit deeper and looking at what kind of motorized transportation have which negative contribution. And then we found out over the last 10 years, all parts of transportation were growing because we're traveling more. But if you look at this, the CO2 emission, we found out that railway is not growing. It is actually, it's contributing less to the emission. So that means it's because it's the most sustainable way of motorized transportation. It just takes 16% of the energy consumption or 20% of the CO2 emission compared to other motorized ways of transport. And then we were looking into this railway sector more and more, and now I have a question to you. Who traveled by train during the last month? That's a lot of people. That's good. So who experienced the delay? Okay, that's a lot too. So, and that's not good. And we looked into that a little bit deeper. And with Konux, what we are helping our customers globally, in today 8 countries, we are helping increasing their capacity, reliability, and cost efficiency by using sensor data and AI to tell them when they have to go out to maintain what with which tools, so that everybody of you can use the railway system more and more and contribute positively towards our climate goals, which we set out. And we really need to do something right now, because if you looked at the forecast, it doesn't look very good. But every one of us can contribute, and so we set out the vision of Konux to transform railway operations for a sustainable future.
Thank you, Andreas. And last but definitely not least, we have Fabian. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he invested in more than 40 early stage companies. He is one of the co-founders as well of the initiative Leaders for Climate Action, and he's leading the initiative with the VCs. So, we could probably talk 2 hours already about all the investments he did, and he did together with his brother Ferry, who couldn't join us today. But As a co-founder of the Founders Pledge ambassador, Fabian, what is your vision on the Green Pledge? What is your vision? Where should we be in a year from now? When we speak next year at DLD, what have we achieved?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And essentially, in a complementary way to what Anna and Andreas explained, and also what my brother Ferry or what Boris is doing as all being CEOs on the operational side, I'm basically covering the question, how can VCs and other financial investors, especially VC and PE investors, make a positive contribution towards mitigating the climate crisis? And walking the talk in a sense of bringing the primary emissions of our own operations down by, for example, altering our travel policies, traveling less but staying longer, virtualizing, investing in high-end videocon infrastructure rather than flying in and out for meetings, catering renewable energy for our offices, etc. This is rather, when you look at it from a big picture, this is a rather small lever because the teams and operations of investors are technically small. So we are talking at Earlybird across Europe, we're a team of 40 people. But in our portfolio, we're talking about 10, 15,000 employees. So that's where the lever is big. So besides walking the talk and doing what we can ourselves to measure, to reduce, and also to offset our footprint, we are basically aiming to use this lever and basically create a transmission into the portfolio companies. And that is basically where where the sustainability clause that Boris and Jan Christoph explained earlier comes into play, and where we indeed were basically spearheading this movement of saying this is not just about informal conversations with our portfolio CEOs and about a bit of education here and there, but it's about making legally binding commitments and making a clear statement across the whole VC ecosystem. Basically, the A-list of all German VCs have already joined us, and now internationalization, pan-European, is the next step. North Zone has just signed up yesterday. That's kind of the first step towards the London and Nordic ecosystem. But making this legally binding statement and saying, if you as an operational organization and as founders do not care about your impact on environment and society, and that's very closely interlinked, then we are simply not interested to be your shareholders, to do business with you, to put our equity into your company. That is the biggest lever we have as investors, and that goes alongside the question, how can we also put our money where our mouth is in terms of technologies. So besides basically spearheading these efforts of educating and also nudging our portfolio companies to operate more eco-sustainable, we have founded some 9 months ago a dedicated investment practice for climate tech. And that is a cross-industry, cross-technology practice group that looks at carbon capture, at alternative energy, non-animal nutrition, also education and behavioral change for consumers, but also for businesses, smart mobility, smart infrastructure, to name a few. So we also actively try to invest and use our money as the second big lever to put it behind technologies who, with their primary impact, already help making a positive contribution.
Yeah. Do you see a difference? I remember very well about, 3-4 years ago, Douglas Rushkoff introduced his book, Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus at a DLD in New York. And he was particularly talking about how much impact investors have in of course, whoever pays the money has an impact on the strategy and how a company moves. Do you see a difference? You're into this topic now for quite a while. Do you see a difference within the last 3-4 years? When you would have talked to all those VCs 4 years ago, would they have said, great idea, or would they have just said, okay, yeah, maybe, never, ever?
Yeah, fair point. You're basically putting the finger on the spot here. So unfortunately, the momentum that we currently see in the public markets, speaking of BlackRock, Larry Fink, etc., is almost higher than we see in the PE and VC ecosystem. So what I'm trying to say is that the level of mindset change and the momentum of mindset change in public market investors seems to be stronger and quicker than it is on the institutional investor side of those who invest in VC funds. And it is actually a fine line and a challenging task for us as a VC firm with 1.5 billion euros assets under management and a 22 years history to succeed in doing this transformation away from purely financially motivated investments towards integrating at the intersection of impact and financial returns without killing the business, without basically breaking the relationships with our investors. So we are, to some extent, also dependent on the mindset shift of our institutional investors. And this is really a challenging task, and we try to address it also by educating our investors on why we are step-by-step amending the strategy, while, and that's important, not giving up financial returns, but trying to find the intersection between financial returns, financially attractive investments, and impactful investments. And we call that the power of and. It's not either or, it's not charity or profit, but there is basically now emerging a new nucleus, a new type of entrepreneur. Basically, like Anna represents it in its best way, having a background with Zalando with outfittery, and now basically pursuing a much more purpose-driven product in her next venture. And this is a fundamental shift, and this is also completely different to what we've seen in the 2000 years, where Earlybird has also lost money in hardware, renewable energy investments, and many others have lost. And that's also causing a bit of a hesitance, especially with the I want to say the older generation of the 50, 60, 70-year-old decision makers in the industry who still have that in mind and who still have this notion of, that's charity. Yeah? And this is what we need to transform, and we need to transform it in a data-driven way, not only with a narrative, with a story. And that's why we dig into returns of US climate tech funds who are actually really good. There's many 20, 30 and plus net IRR in that sector, and that's basically the notion we need to convey. And that's how we need to generate the buy-in of the whole ecosystem. Our own mindset change is unfortunately not enough.
Yeah, I agree. And thanks for referring to Anna, because you mentioned educating your as well VCs, but as well CEOs. And Anna, I think what you are building with planetly.org is are those tools to help not only measure, but as well to educate. And you have some great examples that, when you think about it, are so simple that everybody can implement it. So please.
Yeah. Yes, I recently heard a great case from UBS, so from the bank. And what they did, they started in their stores, in the finance stores, they started weighting their garbage. So they put a number on how much garbage, every garbage that goes out there, they weight it. Like really put machine there to do this. So they put a number on how much garbage do we produce here in the stores. And suddenly this number was like top of mind. Suddenly it was measurable. And suddenly people started to act on this and to reduce the garbage. And they like heavily reduced it only by really measuring it and then putting a target on it. So I think this is a great case study. And yeah, we want to enable all companies to do the same when it comes to carbon footprint and waste, and other capabilities.
Yeah. And Andreas, you not only with Konux did show, are on revolutionizing the transport system as well. You have great examples how you walk your talk and lead by example in your companies, and how your team follows and are change makers. I think that's a great tip as well for everybody. What can you do in your own environment?
So I will keep it short regarding time, but I would say especially our team also teach me how to, what is necessary to do that. I think when more and more inside our company, we have talked about climate change during the brown bags in the engineering team, instead of talking about the latest papers of machine learning. My employees started going out, talking to restaurants around our area, because we were figuring out that every time we come from lunch, we have so much garbage afterwards. And they said, can we come with our own plates? And now they're walking with their own plates, and we are walking with our own plates to restaurants. And I also personally started since a few months now being primarily vegan, and now I see more and more vegans in our own company as well as vegetarians, and I think it is all that you can do on a private level that has a certain impact to everybody who's around you. And I had this very, very funny situation lately at a birthday where one guy was coming in and saying to her or his girlfriend, "Hey, why do you eat? You're vegan again. You don't eat meat." So he was making fun of it. Then he was looking around and seeing that like 10 other people are either vegetarian or vegan, and he was the only guy with meat on his plate. So I think there is something which you can do. Is this the only thing that will save our planet? Definitely not. But I think each individual here in the room can have an impact, either through the company, through their vision, through their mission, and they're living up to that, and on your individual behavior, day by day by day. And I think what is really important for me personally, that we don't say, yeah, but people in China or somewhere else, they don't do the same thing. That doesn't matter. I mean, if everybody looks at himself doing something better, it will have a positive impact, and nobody can argue that away. And I think this is also the last message from my side. So think about yourself, how you can contribute, because that has an impact. And it has an impact on, to your environment. And this is what matters, because we need us all.
And I think that was a great last word of our panel. We did run out of time. I wanted to ask everybody, what are you adding? But I think we already heard what they are adding, and I could talk for hours with you. Thank you so much. It was a great honor speaking to you.
Thank you. Thank you.